This almost ruined my marriage, a true story of betrayal. I never imagined I would be the kind of woman who conceals things from my husband. For a decade, we've exchanged everything, our aspirations, anxieties, and even our most profound yearnings. We've consistently embraced an open-minded approach, embodying the type of couple that friends admire for our adventurous nature and unshakable connection. As I sit here, my heart racing and palms sweaty, I come to the startling realization that I'm on the verge of revealing a secret I never meant to disclose. It all began quite innocently. Mark and I constantly sought out new ways to infuse excitement into our marriage. Evenings spent together, getaways, imaginative scenarios, all woven into the fabric of our dedication to one another. One evening, while savoring a glass of wine, Mark proposed an intriguing idea. What if we explored the idea of couple swapping? He inquired nonchalantly, as if he were proposing a fresh series to binge on Netflix. I chuckled, believing it to be a jest. Are you really serious? Why not? He remarked, his blue eyes sparkling with playful intent. It's merely a game. We establish guidelines and it revolves around trust. No obligations involved. The concept was daring, even for our standards. However, the manner in which Mark articulated it was clear and logical. It wasn't about affection or finding substitutes for one another. It was about discovering, side by side, with total transparency. Following several additional conversations, I came to an agreement. The guideline was straightforward. It was essential that we both agreed, and it would always remain a singular experience with no possibility of revisiting. Our initial experiences were, to be honest, exhilarating. They ignited a fresh energy in our relationship, and I cherished the moments we shared, laughter, and reflected on it afterward, strengthening our bond. Then arrived the night that transformed everything. Mark encountered a couple via a mutual friend. Sarah exuded a vibrant energy, her personality bright and engaging, while her husband, James, possessed a calm yet assured demeanor. He was a tall, broad-shouldered figure whose presence commanded attention. From the instant our paths crossed, an unusual tension enveloped me whenever James was close by. His rich voice, the intensity of his gaze. It felt as if he could peer directly into my soul. That evening, the four of us gathered at their residence. The wine poured generously, and before long, Mark and Sarah slipped away into another room, leaving James and me in solitude. The stillness hung thick in the air, and for the first time in years, a wave of anxiety washed over me. You don't have to do this if you're uncomfortable, James said, his voice calm and soothing. I said I was fine, but my voice quivered slightly. James exhibited a gentle firmness, and as the night progressed, I stumbled upon an unexpected revelation. He was distinct, his size, his touch, the way he made me feel, it was overwhelming in a way that left me breathless. For the first time, I encountered an experience that eluded simple description. It wasn't merely physical, it felt as if he had opened a door to a hidden part of my being that I had never realized was there. The following morning, he occupied my thoughts incessantly. His presence lingered like a shadow, intruding on my thoughts, even as I attempted to concentrate on Mark. I persuaded myself it was merely a transient response to something novel and thrilling. As the days stretched into weeks, it became clear that I was deceiving myself. James had made an impression on me, one that I couldn't overlook. Mark, unaware of the storm brewing within me, proceeded as if nothing had shifted. For him, the experience was merely another chapter in our thrilling narrative. Yet, for me, it marked the start of a hidden truth I would bear in solitude. Reflecting on the past, I find myself wishing I had halted at that point. I regret not expressing my feelings to Mark and collaborating on it together. However, I did not. Instead, I allowed curiosity to flourish. And soon, that curiosity would evolve into something far more perilous. Before we proceed, if you're finding pleasure in this tale, be sure to tap that like button and join the channel. Your support enables us to deliver even more engaging real-life confessions. Enable notifications to ensure you catch every episode. Now, Let us explore further into this hidden existence I never envisioned I would experience. Days went by, yet my thoughts continually wandered back to James. Initially, I reassured myself that it was inconsequential, merely a fleeting thought, a recollection of something unique and thrilling. Yet, the harder I attempted to dismiss it, the more relentless it grew. As I folded laundry or prepared dinner, his face would unexpectedly flash into my thoughts. I would listen to his voice, sensing the heaviness of his hands made my heart race, transporting me back to that room with him. Mark observed the shift within me, but took it for a positive development. You've been glowing lately, he remarked one morning while we enjoyed coffee on the patio. It seems as though you're experiencing more joy. I compelled a smile. I'm simply in a good place, I suppose, yet beneath the surface, I found myself uncertain about how to navigate the tempest swirling within me. I cherished Mark. I continue to do so. He is my closest companion, my ally, the one who has stood by my side through it all. Yet, there was an aspect of James that stirred a part of me I couldn't quite articulate. It wasn't merely tangible. It felt as if he had uncovered a concealed part of my essence, a part one was unaware even existed. One evening, as I was scrolling through my phone, a message from an unfamiliar number caught my attention. Hello, this is James. I hope you don't mind my reaching out. My heart raced with sudden intensity. I gazed, caught in a whirlwind of exhilaration and remorse. I was aware that I ought to remain silent, yet my fingers had a mind of their own. Hey, how did you obtain my number? I typed, my hands shaking with anticipation. Sarah received it from the group conversation. I simply wanted to touch base, no pressure at all. I ought to have drawn the line at that point. I ought to have removed the message and informed Mark, however, I did not. In response I said, and that one reply set everything into motion. In the coming days, James and I communicated through messages. Initially, it was relaxed, filled with casual banter, humor, and easygoing exchanges. However, the mood changed quickly. He inquired about my feelings since that night, and I found it impossible to be dishonest. I couldn't shake it from my mind, I confessed, my heart racing as I pressed send. Neither have I. He responded almost immediately, his words ignited the flames that were already raging within me. I was aware it was not right. I understood that we had established boundaries to safeguard our union. Yet my desire for him eclipsed any feelings of remorse. I reassured myself that it was innocuous, merely a dialogue, yet, beneath it all, I was aware of the truth. One afternoon, while Mark was at work, James proposed that we get together. He simply wanted to have a conversation. Take your time. I paused, every instinct urged me to refuse, to put a stop to this before it escalated further, yet the pull of curiosity and desire prevailed. We encountered each other at a quaint little cafe on the fringes of town, just distant enough from home to steer clear of any unexpected meetings. Anyone we were familiar with. Encountering him once more unleashed a torrent of feelings within me. Anticipation, anxiety, remorse. Thank you for coming, he said, his smile captivating. We conversed for hours, covering a multitude of topics, and silence prevails. He possessed a remarkable ability to make me feel acknowledged, as if I were the sole individual in existence who truly counted. It was exhilarating. As the moment to depart arrived, he accompanied me to my vehicle. I convinced myself that this was the moment. Simply a meeting, nothing beyond that. As I turned to bid farewell, he moved nearer, his hand lightly grazing mine. The air crackled with tension, and before I realized what was happening, our lips met in a kiss. The guilt crashed over me like a tidal wave as I drove home. I convinced myself it was just a fleeting mistake, a brief lapse in judgment I would never allow to happen again. Yet, beneath the surface, I understood I was already in over my head. I convinced myself that that kiss marked the conclusion of everything. A simple error, a fleeting miscalculation. Nothing beyond that, yet the reality ate away at me, remaining in each silent instant. James didn't simplify things, his messages arrived with increasing frequency. Each one drew me further into a web. And I found myself too weak to break free. He possessed a captivating charm, showed great attentiveness, and demonstrated unwavering persistence. And I was careless. It began with justifications. Mark would head to work, and I would mention that I was off to the gym or running errands. Instead, I found myself driving to meet James. The initial clandestine gathering was not arranged in advance. At least, that's what I convinced myself. One morning, James sent me a text that read, "I can't stop thinking about you. Shall we arrange a meeting, only for a brief moment?" My pulse quickened as I absorbed his words. I wished to express a refusal. I had to decline, yet my fingers crafted an alternate reply. "All right, where to?" We encountered each other at a motel just outside of town, the sort of establishment that would hardly catch anyone's eye. As I parked my car, I paused. The burden of my impending action felt overwhelming. But then I saw him standing by the door, and all my doubts vanished into thin air. "Hey," he said, his voice calm and unwavering. As if this were the most ordinary thing imaginable. "Hey," I responded, my voice scarcely rising above a whisper. The space was modest and ordinary, featuring only a bed, a nightstand, and a television affixed to the wall. Yet, as soon as we entered, the atmosphere shifted. "I wasn't certain you would arrive," he remarked, his gaze probing into mine. I confessed that I wasn't certain either. He moved nearer, his hand lightly grazing my cheek. "If you're not interested, we can skip this altogether." However, I did. I craved him more than I had ever craved anything in my life. As we united, all my guilt and hesitation melted away into the background. The initial clandestine gathering was a tempest of feelings. Fervor, excitement, and an insistent whisper of treachery that I endeavored to dismiss. James exceeded all my expectations and then some, for the first time in years. I experienced a profound sense of vitality. As I drove home, reality hit me like a crashing wave. What had I done? How could I meet Mark's gaze? Fully aware that I had shattered the very essence of our trust, Mark welcomed me with a kiss as I entered, unaware of the tempest swirling within me. "How was your day?" he inquired, his smile radiating warmth and sincerity. "Good," I deceived, my stomach twisting. As Mark lay asleep next to me that night, I found myself gazing at the ceiling. Reflecting on the day's happenings in my thoughts. I convinced myself it was just a fleeting moment, an error I would never make again. Yet, beneath the surface, I was aware of my deception. James was a substance, and I was already hooked. I wish I could say that was the final moment I discovered the strength to step back and concentrate on my marriage. Yet, James had transformed into my refuge, my hidden excitement, and I couldn't bear to lose him. It wasn't merely the physical connection. Although that aspect of him was unlike anything I had ever encountered. It was how he ignited a sense of vitality within me, making me feel acknowledged and wanted in a manner I hadn't experienced in years. Each message, each stolen moment with him felt like a surge of adrenaline, drawing me further into an irresistible world. Our clandestine gatherings grew increasingly regular, taking place in coffee shops, motels, and even a secluded spot in the park. We discovered opportunities to connect whenever possible. I would fabricate reasons to tell Mark, asserting that I had errands to attend to or friends to catch up with. I despised deceiving him. However, the idea of losing what I shared with James filled me with even greater fear. "You truly are remarkable, did you realize that?" James remarked one afternoon, as we lay entwined in the soft glow of a motel room. I smiled, my heart swelling with a blend of pride and guilt. "Your actions evoke those feelings in me." He pressed his lips against mine, a spark igniting that coursed through me like electricity. "I long for something greater than this." His words lingered in the atmosphere, thick and menacing. "Additional. Is there anything better than this? What did that even signify?" I set the thought aside, concentrating instead on how he made me feel right then and there. However, the fissures in my dual existence were beginning to reveal themselves. Mark was not unaware. He had begun to observe the transformations within me. "You've been distracted lately," he said one evening as we sat on the couch, a movie playing in the background. "Is everything all right?" naturally, I responded too hastily, steering clear of his eyes. Simply a great deal on my mind. Mark furrowed his brow, yet chose not to pursue the matter further. Nonetheless, his suspicion was palpable, prompting me to exercise greater caution. I began erasing messages from James, and became careful to conceal any evidence of his presence. Despite my efforts, the guilt started to gnaw at me, each time Mark kissed me or held my hand. I felt like an imposter, yet, regardless of the disdain I felt for myself, I found it impossible to cease. James had turned into an obsession, and I found myself utterly helpless in its grip. One afternoon, as I was heading out to meet James, Mark shouted my name. "Where are you headed?" he inquired, his tone relaxed, yet his gaze penetrating. "Merely handling a few tasks," I remarked. Managing to put on a smile. "Would you like me to accompany you?" My heart raced with excitement. No, it's perfectly all right. Merely mundane content. Mark observed me for a moment before giving a nod. "All right, take care." As I stepped outside, a wave of unease twisted in my stomach. Mark was becoming increasingly suspicious. And I realized it was just a matter of time before he began to investigate further, yet, the idea of letting go of James was simply intolerable. That evening, as I lay in bed beside Mark, I came to the unsettling realization that I was living on borrowed time. Just a single misstep, and all that I had constructed with Mark would come tumbling down, yet, in spite of the dangers, I found myself unable to resist. James was an exhilarating rush I couldn't escape, and I was ready to gamble everything to maintain that sense of vitality. I was caught off guard by the events of that night. No matter how often I attempted to persuade myself that I could break free, that I could untangle this web of deceit, there was always another justification, another instance that would draw me further into the turmoil. I began to sense that I was trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape, yet this evening had an unusual quality. This evening, I sensed an unsettling feeling, as if the burden of it all had finally settled upon my shoulders. I had spent some time with James earlier. Just a brief meeting that seemed like a frantic effort to break free from the overwhelming guilt that had been weighing on me. As I rolled into the driveway, my phone vibrated with a buzz. A message arrived from Mark. "I will arrive home later than usual. I have a surprise for you." I didn't give it much thought back then. He had been occupied with his responsibilities recently, so I assumed it was merely another late-night assignment he was tackling. As I stepped into the house, an unsettling feeling washed over me. The lights flickered softly, casting gentle shadows, while the house remained still and serene, excessively silent. I shouted for Mark, yet silence lingered in response. I furrowed my brow and made my way to the bedroom, contemplating the possibility that he had dozed off early or was simply tucked away, scheming his surprise. However, as I swung the door open, I found my breath hitching in my throat. In the muted glow, I caught sight of Mark, alongside Sarah, James's wife, the very woman with whom I'd been clandestinely rendezvousing while her husband was none the wiser. I stopped in my tracks, words escaping me, my heart pounding as I observed them separate swiftly, their expressions etched with disbelief and terror. "What is this?" I murmured, struggling to grasp the unfolding events. Mark rose abruptly, his expression a blend of remorse and sorrow. I never intended for you to discover it like this." Sarah swiftly composed herself, rising from the bed with determination. "This wasn't how it was supposed to happen," she said, her voice trembling and barely above a whisper. I insisted, "Explain to me what's happening." My voice elevating in astonishment. Mark approached me, extending his hands as if to soothe my unease. "I understand this may appear unfavorable, but it's not as it seems. Is that really my perspective?" I chuckled with a hint of bitterness. "You're in here with her, Mark. How long has this been happening?" "What do you mean it's not what I believe?" Sarah gazed at me, her eyes brimming with regret. "It's not solely him," she confessed quietly. "I've been seeing James for months, and I'm aware you've been seeing him too. My universe slanted upon its axis. What is happening?" I uttered, the words scarcely escaping my lips. My apologies, Sarah went on. Upon discovering what you were involved in with James, we were at a loss for what to do next, for such a long time. We've all been concealing things from one another. Mark entered, his voice filled with urgency. It began as an error, yet then, we became entangled in it. We never intended for things to escalate to this point. Everything felt like a bizarre spectacle, as if I were a spectator to a poorly scripted drama playing out in my own existence. I was unable to work through it. My spouse and his affair partner had been clandestinely meeting, while I had been engaging in the same secretive behavior with her husband. So, you've been with Sarah all along, I inquired, the treachery gnawing at my insides. Mark's expression. He nodded, his demeanor softened. I never intended for it to escalate like this. But once we became entangled, there was no turning back. I felt a profound silence envelop me, rendering me speechless for what seemed like an eternity. The stillness that enveloped us was heavy and unsettling. At last, I found my voice. How could you, Mark, how could you treat me this way, for us? Mark's gaze was heavy with sadness. There's no excuse. Yet when we discovered the truth about you and James, it seemed as if all the secrets we had been concealing from one another were finally revealed. We were mistaken, both of us. However, you must realize that my love for you has never wavered. Emotions surged within me as I absorbed it all, the jolt, the bewilderment, the anguish, everything came crashing together in an instant. The existence I believed to be mine was merely a mirage. I glanced at Sarah, the woman I had previously regarded with a mix of suspicion and envy. What do you think? How could you turn your back on your own marriage like this? Sarah's gaze was heavy with embarrassment. I was equally unsure of how to handle it. Your presence brought me solace. In the notion that I wasn't alone. One experiencing this emotion. Yet, here we find ourselves, ensnared in a chaotic situation. I was at a loss for words. A part of me yearned to let out a cry. To hold them accountable for all they had inflicted upon me. However, there exists another aspect of me, the aspect that was still grappling with this convoluted reality. I encountered an unexpected feeling. Comprehension. We've all made mistakes, I murmured, my gaze fixed on the ground. Every one of us, however, this does not define us. We must find a solution to this. Every one of us. Mark nodded slowly, his voice uncertain. What would you like to pursue next? I can't bear the thought of losing you. However, I am aware that my actions are beyond redemption. Sarah approached me, her expression becoming gentler. Perhaps, just perhaps, we can begin anew, not only as pairs, but also as unique individuals. We have been in denial for far too long. Feigning that all was well when it truly wasn't. I inhaled deeply, my thoughts swirling with a tumult of emotions. For the first time, I perceived the broader perspective. We found ourselves ensnared in a tangled web of deception. To discover a way forward, we needed to confront our own truths, and with one another. I have no idea what lies ahead, I finally admitted. My voice unwavering. In spite of the tears that hovered on the brink of spilling, however, we must make an effort, at the very least. For us, for our unions. Mark extended his hand, enveloping mine in a gentle squeeze. We'll sort it out. In unison, Sarah nodded in agreement. We must, for the well-being of our families, and so, in spite of the chaos we had all brought into existence. An intricate understanding existed between us. We were uncertain about what the future would hold. For the first time in a long while, we were embracing honesty. Perhaps, if we embrace that honesty, it could offer us the opportunity to mend what we've shattered. It was chaotic. It was excruciating. Yet, I held on to hope. After a lengthy period, a sense of hope washed over me. In the days that followed, circumstances did not transform into something better. However, they didn't turn out to be as bad as I had anticipated. The atmosphere surrounding us was heavy with unease. Yet, it was a genuine tension. After months of turmoil, I finally found the strength to gaze at Mark without the suffocating weight of my hidden truth pressing down on me. He, too, appeared somehow more buoyant. Yet, the burden of our actions remained ever present in the shadows. We chose to take a step back from it all. To allow ourselves the opportunity to reflect and determine what we genuinely desired. No more games. Enough with the hidden truths, enough with the deception. We needed to discover a path to restore faith in both ourselves and in one another. After that night, Mark and I hardly discussed Sarah and James. The emphasis transitioned from our chaotic entanglements to the quiet realization that we had to invest in our marriage. I'm uncertain whether it was the unfiltered truth that emerged from confessing it all, or simply the overwhelming fatigue that stemmed from the deception. However, we began to share our thoughts and feelings in ways we hadn't done in a long time. However, we took our time. We began attending therapy. With each session feeling like we were uncovering the layers of pain we had accumulated over time. Gradually, we started to sense that we were united as a team once more. Much work remained to be accomplished. Recovery takes time. However, I started to think that perhaps we could recover something valuable regarding Sarah and James. We all concurred that it was wise to pause for a moment. At this moment, our priority must be to concentrate on our own well-being. To address the aftermath we had created before considering any further entanglements. I can't claim that everything was flawless after that or that there weren't times when I questioned our future. Yet, this time felt distinct. Something genuine. We had all experienced something beyond comprehension. And it transformed us, regardless of our preferences. I discovered that my perspective on Mark had shifted. It had evolved beyond mere physical attraction. It was a journey to uncover our true selves, the essence of who we were before the chaos ensued. It was about recognizing each other's imperfections and embracing them. It was about understanding that, ultimately, love encompassed more than just the peaks. It was about enduring the tempest side by side. Perhaps, just perhaps, it was about discovering the art of forgiveness, not only each other but also ourselves. The path forward was fraught with challenges, yet, we were progressing onward. One step at a time. In unity, and that sufficed for me. As for James and Sarah, I was uncertain about what lay ahead for them. Perhaps they would discover a method to navigate their challenges. Or perhaps their tale had already reached its conclusion. However, one thing was evident. We could only manage our own actions. The path we have decided to follow from this point forward. Life presented us with unexpected challenges we could never have anticipated. As I lay beside Mark, our hands entwined, I felt a sense of hope that we could truly make this work. Sometimes, the toughest journeys bring us to the most significant places. And I was finally prepared to embark on that journey alongside him.